Hello, this is John from caveofprogramming.com. In this tutorial we're going to look at supplying constructor arguments to your Spring Beans. So I've got this little hello world type Spring program, and in my beans.xml, which I've put in a package here, we're just creating this one bean, this very simple person class. Now let's suppose that the person class has some properties. Let's give it a private int ID, for example, and a private string name. So we'll imagine that every person has an ID and a name, and we'll give person a constructor that can set ID and name. So I'm going to right click here and go to source, generate constructor using fields, and tick ID and name and click OK. And let's get rid of the call to super here because we don't need that. And I'll also give person a toString method to make it easier to see what's happening here. So again, I'll right click, go to source, generate toString, and tick ID and name, and there we are. So now in my app.java I could do sysout person, and it's not going to look very interesting in a moment. Let's just run it. Well, in fact we get an error now, and the reason for this is that now I've given person a constructor that takes two arguments, but of course in the beans.xml I'm not supplying any arguments to the constructor. It's trying to load it with the no argument constructor. Let's fix that initially just by giving it a no argument constructor, public person, like this, and then save it and then run that, and now the error will go away. I say confidently. Let's try it. There we go. So it says, hello, I'm a person. And from our sysout now, we're getting this toString thing. And we see that the ID is set to naught and the name is null. The default values, of course, for these instance variables. But now what we can do is we can invoke this version of the constructor from beans.xml and set values for ID and name. And this is pretty simple to do. Again, you could do it by hand quite easily, but if you're using Eclipse, it's easier to use this kind of specialized editor for beans.xml or for your XML file, whatever you've called it. So let's go to Beans tab here, and I'll right click my person bean, and I'll go to insert constructor arg element. And now actually Spring's really flexible about this. Probably if I just specify values here for the arguments to my constructor, that will be enough. Let's just try that. So the first argument to my constructor that I want is ID, and it's an int, and the second one is a string name. So let's say 777 for the first constructor argument, and then I'll go back to person, right click again, and go to insert constructor arg element, and again we'll give it a name like let's just call it Mary, and I'll save, and I'll try running this. I think it will work. I'll run it, and now we see that in fact we see from this is coming from the system.out.println, and the toString method is formatting my person object like this. So it says ID is now 777 and name is Mary. And if we look at what's happened in the XML, so let's go to the beans.xml and look at the source view. What's happened is we've added here a subtag within the bean tag called constructor-arg, and the value is set to 777. And there's the ending tag, and we've got a second one with value set to Mary. I'm just going to do Control-Shift-F, or on the Mac here, Command-Shift-F, which will hopefully automatically format my XML. If I click in it first maybe, there we go, that looks a bit nicer. So when you edit the XML with this editor from the Spring IDE plugin in Eclipse, sometimes it's not very nicely formatted, and because I like to understand the raw view, it's important, I think. Sometimes I like to add in blank lines or just format it with Control-Shift-F automatically. Now that's great, but it's not really good practice because we're letting Spring kind of we're not doing much work to specify exactly what constructor arguments to set, and I think it's better really to be more precise about it, to make sure there are no slip-ups. So if I go back to the Beans view, the Beans kind of editor here with this Beans tab on the XML file, beans.xml, and I look at, let's say, the first constructor arg, it's better to set something here to make sure you're absolutely definitely getting the right constructor argument, rather than relying on just the order of tags in XML, which I feel is not really a good thing. So you could specify the type here. You could say the type is int or string. That's up to you. But the two most important ones probably are name or index. Index, we could specify 0, let's say, for the first one, and an index of 1 for the second constructor argument, and that should work. But probably the best thing to do normally is to give a name for the constructor arg. So let's say ID for the first one, and for the second one let's specify name, and these were of course the names of the parameters here. So if I run that now after saving it, that works as before, and if I type something that's not valid like name3, we would hope for an error like that. So these names here, they're just their argument names. Yeah, you can specify type if you want. So I could type here, I assume int, like that. I don't know if we're allowed to type a primitive type here. Let's just try it. I never tried. Yeah, that seems fine. And again, if you specify something wacky, it's going to break, so don't do that. But as you see, the type is optional, and you don't have to put it in at all. It's completely up to you. Let's just run that. There we go. Now, so the only one we haven't looked at now is ref, and we're going to look at that later. And as you'll see, ref allows you to do dependency injection. It allows you to use another bean as the value of the thing you're setting. Instead of specifying a value, you can use ref to specify another bean. But we'll look at that in a future tutorial. In the next tutorial, we're going to look at setting properties in the same way. So join me again then, and until next time. Yeah, I should mention, don't forget, if you're looking at this on YouTube, this is a free video from a bigger course, and you can find a link to the complete course in the description on YouTube. I'll also put this video on www.caveofprogramming.com. That's all one word, and I'll upload the source code as well, so you can take a look at it if you want. So until next time, happy coding.